You and everyone, it's a topic that often confuses us and sometimes even shakes our confidence, the sudden shift in someone's attitude towards us. One moment they might be a close friend or colleague, and the next it feels like they've turned against you. So why do people start suddenly hating you? Is it something you did, or is it a reflection of their inner struggles? Today, I'll delve into this complex emotional landscape and try to understand what triggers such abrupt changes. Miscommunication or misunderstanding is one of the most common reasons why people suddenly start to distance themselves or even express hostility toward you. It's incredible how a single offhand comment or action can create an entirely new narrative in someone's mind. The issue with miscommunication is that it often goes unnoticed until the damage has already been done. Sometimes we say something in passing or act in a way we think is perfectly harmless, but the person on the receiving end interprets it in a completely different light. A joke that was meant to be funny could be perceived as an insult, or a comment made with good intentions might be seen as patronizing or critical. These misunderstandings can be especially tricky because they're not always immediately recognized. The person might not confront you, instead silently stewing in their own version of the story, which only amplifies the negativity. The reason these miscommunications hurt relationships so much is because they tap into deeper emotions. When someone feels misunderstood, it often stirs up feelings of betrayal or frustration. They start to wonder whether you genuinely care about them or whether they are simply being overlooked or judged. In some cases, their mind can start filling in the blanks, imagining intentions or motives behind your words or actions that may not have existed in the first place. This creates a cycle of negativity where the more they stew over the perceived slight, the more distant and hostile they become. Meanwhile, you're left confused and possibly even unaware of what went wrong. What's also challenging about miscommunication is that it can be compounded by other factors. People's moods, their current life circumstances, or even their previous experiences with others can color how they interpret your words. For instance, if someone is going through a tough time in their personal life, whether it's stress at work, difficulties in their relationships, or struggles with their own self-esteem, they might be more sensitive to things that wouldn't normally bother them. Something as simple as you canceling plans or not responding to a text in a timely manner can suddenly become a much larger issue because the other person is already feeling vulnerable or stressed. This dynamic is particularly difficult in friendships and close relationships, where the expectation is often that both parties will communicate openly and honestly. However, when miscommunication happens, it can make it hard to find a way back to clarity. The key to resolving this issue is often simply addressing the misunderstanding directly. Unfortunately, that requires both people to be open to discussing their feelings and perceptions, which isn't always easy. The person who feels hurt might be reluctant to bring it up for fear of making things worse, or they might assume that you don't care enough to notice. On the flip side, the person who made the comment or took the action might not even be aware that it caused harm, and they may feel defensive when confronted. This is where active listening and empathy become essential. It's crucial to take the time to truly understand the other person's perspective, even if it doesn't align with your intentions. While it's natural to want to defend yourself or justify your actions, the most productive approach is often to acknowledge how they felt and to clarify the situation without becoming defensive. It's also important to remember that people interpret things through the lens of their own experiences, so what seems like a small issue to you could feel like a much bigger one to them. If we can learn to listen carefully and communicate openly, many of these misunderstandings can be cleared up before they evolve into something more significant. Envy or jealousy is one of the more difficult reasons to navigate when someone suddenly starts to distance themselves or act hostile toward you. It's not always easy to recognize when envy is at play because it often manifests in subtle ways. Initially, it may appear as minor irritations or a slight coolness in the relationship. The person may stop celebrating your successes or may make passive-aggressive comments about your achievements. However, the root cause is often deeper than mere frustration. It stems from their perception that you have something they want or feel they are lacking. Envy is a powerful emotion, often driven by feelings of inadequacy or insecurity. When someone feels like they're falling short in comparison to you, they may struggle with accepting their own situation and begin resenting the source of their discomfort, which in this case is you. The most challenging aspect of dealing with envy is that it's not always outwardly expressed. Those who feel envious may not openly acknowledge their jealousy, especially if they are close to you. Instead, they might act out in ways that confuse or hurt you without being able to articulate the true reason behind their behavior. The person may not even fully understand why they feel the way they do, making it all the more difficult for both of you to address the issue. It can lead to emotional withdrawal, sharp comments, or even sabotage in certain extreme cases. For example, someone might not openly admit that they are jealous of your success at work, but their actions, like downplaying your achievements or dismissing your ideas, can show a deep-seated bitterness that stems from their own frustrations. At the core of envy is the fear of being inadequate or overlooked. People who struggle with feelings of jealousy often find it difficult to celebrate others' victories because it forces them to confront their own perceived deficiencies. This is especially true if they feel like their own life isn't measuring up to expectations, whether those are personal goals or societal standards. The more they see you achieving something they want, the more they may feel trapped in their own sense of failure. For example, if someone feels stuck in a job they don't enjoy, but they see you excelling in a career or achieving a personal milestone, they might internalize that comparison, causing their envy to grow. They may start resenting you, not for anything you've done, but because your success shines a light on the things they feel they are lacking in their own life. In some cases, this jealousy doesn't just stay contained in small passive ways. It can evolve into full-blown resentment or bitterness. The envious person may start to isolate themselves from you, not wanting to be around someone who reminds them of their own perceived inadequacies. They may withdraw from conversations or make fewer attempts to engage with you socially. Over time, this can feel like a loss, as a once close relationship turns strained or even toxic. You may find yourself confused, trying to figure out what went wrong, while the person who feels envious grows increasingly resentful without ever addressing the root cause of their feelings. It's important to remember that envy is not necessarily a reflection of who you are, but rather a sign of someone else's internal struggles. It's also crucial to recognize that jealousy often stems from a desire for self-improvement or fulfillment, but it is channeled in a way that's negative and destructive. The envious person may long for the success, happiness, or recognition that they believe you have, but they may not have the tools or self-awareness to deal with their feelings in a healthy way. As a result, their jealousy may cause them to project their dissatisfaction onto you, rather than confronting their own issues directly. Recognizing envy in a relationship can be incredibly challenging because it's not always an overt expression of malice. But once you understand that jealousy is often rooted in feelings of insecurity or self-doubt, it becomes easier to navigate these situations with empathy. It's not about diminishing your success or pretending it didn't happen. It's about understanding that the envious person might be struggling with their own feelings of not being good enough. In these situations, it's essential to approach the relationship with patience and compassion, while also setting boundaries to protect your own well-being. While you can't control how others feel, you can control how you respond, and whether you choose to engage with someone who may be projecting their own unhappiness onto you. Personal insecurities are a major driver behind the sudden onset of hostility or distance in relationships. It's often difficult for us to understand how deep-rooted insecurities can affect the way people interact with those around them, especially when it feels like the person has no apparent reason for acting out. However, the reality is that many times, the way someone behaves toward you is not a reflection of you, but rather a reflection of their own inner struggles. When someone feels insecure about themselves, it can trigger a variety of reactions, often ones that feel deeply personal and hurtful. This is because insecurities are tied to someone's sense of self-worth and identity, and when that foundation feels shaky, they may project their frustrations onto others. Someone who feels insecure about their appearance, achievements, or even their social status may find it incredibly difficult to handle situations where others seem to be excelling or receiving attention. These feelings can manifest as passive-aggressive behavior, hurtful remarks, or even complete withdrawal from the relationship. For example, a person who constantly compares themselves to others may start resenting you for seemingly having something they don't, whether it's success, a fulfilling relationship, or the confidence to pursue their passions. The insecure person may not even be fully aware of how their own feelings of inadequacy are shaping their behavior, but their actions can create an emotional distance between them and others. This dynamic is particularly challenging in friendships or close relationships because it's often impossible to predict when insecurity will manifest itself. On the surface, the person may seem fine or even confident, but beneath that, they may harbor a deep sense of self-doubt. When they see you thriving or receiving recognition, it can be a painful reminder of their own perceived failures, leading to feelings of resentment. Rather than being able to celebrate your achievements, they may feel bitter or envious, and those emotions can eventually push them to withdraw or express hostility. In their minds, it's not about you, it's about their inability to live up to the expectations they've placed on themselves or what they believe society expects of them. Insecurities can also cause people to be hypersensitive to what others say or do. A casual comment or a simple observation could be interpreted as criticism or judgment, even if it wasn't intended that way. If someone is already feeling low about themselves, they are more likely to misinterpret neutral or positive feedback as an attack. For example, if someone is feeling insecure about their career and you mention a new project you're working on or a professional milestone you've reached, they may not see it as a friendly conversation topic. Instead, they might interpret it as a reminder of their own perceived failures, which can cause them to react defensively, or worse, start pulling away from you. Their insecurity can create a wall between you both, making it difficult to navigate the relationship in a healthy way. Additionally, when someone is constantly battling personal insecurities, they may struggle with jealousy or fear of being judged, which can cloud their ability to engage in positive, supportive interactions. This means that instead of celebrating your success, they might feel compelled to bring you down or undermine your achievements, whether intentionally or not. The reason for this isn't necessarily malice, but rather a way for them to cope with their own feelings of inferiority. By diminishing someone else, they feel momentarily better about themselves, even if it's only a temporary solution to their own self-esteem issues. In their minds, by putting you down or distancing themselves from you, they may believe they can protect themselves from the discomfort of comparing their own life to yours. When it comes to resolving these types of issues, it's crucial to understand that personal insecurities are deeply rooted in a person's history, upbringing, and experiences. They often don't arise overnight but develop over time as a result of unmet needs, negative self-talk, or external pressures. Addressing these issues requires empathy and patience, as someone struggling with insecurity may not even realize that they are projecting their negative feelings onto others. The best approach is often to offer support without judgment, while also recognizing that the person needs to work on their own self-esteem and self-worth. Encouraging open, honest communication and providing reassurance can help alleviate some of the emotional strain caused by insecurity. However, it's important to recognize that, while you can be a supportive friend or partner, ultimately, they are the ones who need to take responsibility for addressing their own insecurities in order to heal and improve the relationship. The more you understand that someone's hostility or coldness may be rooted in their own emotional turmoil, the better equipped you are to handle the situation with compassion. While it may hurt to be on the receiving end of their projections, it's important to remember that their actions are more about their struggle with themselves than anything you've done wrong. Unresolved conflict or grudges often play a significant role in the sudden change of someone's behavior toward you, and this is one of the more complex reasons why a person might begin to harbor feelings of hatred or resentment. Conflict in relationships, whether personal or professional, can often fester below the surface without being addressed, sometimes for months or even years. The nature of unresolved conflict is that it doesn't always go away with time, rather it simmers beneath the surface, and when it's not dealt with properly, it eventually erupts. What can make this so difficult to navigate is that, in many cases, the other person may never have expressed their feelings or grievances openly, leaving you completely unaware that there was even an issue to begin with. The frustration of unresolved conflict is compounded by the fact that many people find it difficult to have difficult conversations. Whether it's out of fear of confrontation, a desire to avoid discomfort, or simply not knowing how to address the problem, some individuals may choose to suppress their feelings instead of voicing them. This silent accumulation of resentment can take a toll on the relationship. Over time, each unresolved issue builds on the last, creating an ever-growing emotional barrier between both parties. A small disagreement from months ago, which may have seemed minor at the time, might be remembered and turned into a much larger issue when added to all the other unresolved conflicts. The longer the conflict remains unaddressed, the more difficult it becomes to repair the damage done, and the deeper the resentment grows. In some situations, one person may have hurt or disappointed the other, but instead of having an open conversation about how it made them feel, the hurt person may choose to hold on to the grievance. Instead of confronting the issue, they may withdraw emotionally, acting as though everything is fine on the surface. This passive-aggressive approach is incredibly harmful to the relationship because it prevents any kind of resolution from happening. The person harboring the grudge may begin to build up a negative narrative around you in their mind, assuming that you are fully aware of the hurt you've caused, and that you are intentionally choosing to ignore their feelings. This can lead them to slowly withdraw, showing less interest in the relationship, or offering passive jabs, instead of addressing the issue directly. The longer this goes on, the more likely it is that the person will start to display overt signs of hostility, even if the original cause of the tension wasn't major. The challenge with unresolved conflicts is that they can often be misunderstood as personal animosity, when in fact, they are simply the result of unspoken frustrations that have not been properly communicated. For example, if a friend feels neglected or unheard in the relationship, they might begin to shut down, withdrawing from conversations or avoiding spending time with you. They may even begin to criticize or belittle you, projecting their own feelings of hurt onto you, even if you weren't aware that there was an issue to begin with. The underlying issue is that there was no healthy dialogue around the problem, and instead of giving you the chance to explain or apologize, the person has let their emotions build up into a larger, more consuming issue. By the time the conflict has boiled over, they may feel that they are justified in their feelings of hatred or resentment because they have been silently nursing these wounds for so long. Furthermore, in relationships that involve power dynamics, such as between colleagues or in families, unresolved conflict can be especially tricky. In these situations, one party might feel that their concerns are being ignored or dismissed because they do not feel empowered to address the issue directly. In such cases, the person may begin to distance themselves or even act out in ways that seem inexplicable, all because they have not felt heard or validated. This can create a cycle of silent hostility, where both parties are angry but neither is willing to address the issue head-on. Over time, this passive anger can be misinterpreted as pure hatred, when in reality, it's more about feelings of being disrespected or marginalized that have never been given a proper outlet. One of the hardest aspects of dealing with unresolved conflict is that it often forces you into a position where you feel you must constantly guess what's wrong. The other person may not express their hurt, leaving you wondering why the relationship has become strained. If you try to confront the situation, they might act as though everything is fine, further increasing your confusion and frustration. In many cases, the resentment that is built up over time becomes so ingrained that the person may even start to believe that the issues they are holding onto are not worth discussing anymore, or they may have convinced themselves that the relationship is beyond repair. This can be a devastating realization because it makes it much harder to resolve the conflict, especially if the other person isn't willing to engage in open communication. In situations like these, it's crucial to address unresolved conflicts as early as possible before they turn into deep grudges. While this is easier said than done, actively listening and creating a safe space for open dialogue can go a long way in preventing these issues from escalating. However, it's important to understand that not all conflicts are easily resolved, and sometimes it may take time for both parties to process their feelings before they can come together and have a productive conversation. But if left unaddressed, unresolved conflict can significantly damage relationships and even cause them to deteriorate beyond repair, leaving both parties feeling hurt, misunderstood, and resentful. Changing dynamics in relationships is one of the most natural yet painful reasons why people suddenly begin to show hostility or resentment. Relationships are not static, they evolve as both individuals grow and change over time. While this is a normal part of life, it can sometimes feel like a betrayal when someone you've been close to begins to pull away or act cold toward you. These changes in dynamics may be subtle at first, perhaps beginning with small shifts in how often you interact or the types of conversations you have. But eventually, if left unaddressed, they can lead to an emotional distance that feels difficult, if not impossible, to bridge. The cause of this shift can often be attributed to a mismatch in personal growth, values, and expectations between the two individuals. One of the most significant factors in changing relationship dynamics is personal growth. As people go through life, they inevitably experience new opportunities, challenges, and experiences that shape their worldview. These changes may lead to a reevaluation of relationships and what they truly need from them. For example, someone who has gone through a period of intense personal development may find that their previous relationships no longer align with their current values or goals. This doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship is bad or unhealthy, but it can create tension when one person's growth outpaces the other's, or when they no longer feel the same connection they once did. The individual may begin to withdraw emotionally, either because they no longer feel understood or because they sense that the relationship no longer serves their evolving needs. This shift in personal growth can manifest in various ways. For instance, a person may develop new interests, hobbies, or career aspirations that take up more of their time and attention. Their priorities may change, and they might find themselves feeling disconnected from someone who is still focused on the same things they were previously. The resulting sense of alienation can make the other person feel as though they've been left behind, causing feelings of resentment or frustration. What's difficult to recognize in these situations is that this shift isn't necessarily a rejection of the other person, but rather a sign that both individuals are growing in different directions. However, without open communication, this difference can create an emotional divide that feels like a personal attack or betrayal. In addition to personal growth, another reason for changing relationship dynamics is the natural evolution of interests, values, and goals. As time passes, what once brought two people together may no longer be enough to sustain their connection. Friends, for example, might have initially bonded over shared experiences or mutual hobbies, but as they get older, their interests and aspirations may diverge. One friend may become more interested in settling down and starting a family, while the other might prioritize travel or career ambitions. These evolving priorities can create a sense of dissonance, where both individuals no longer relate to each other in the same way. If this change is not acknowledged and discussed, it can lead to feelings of neglect, rejection, and eventually hostility. The person who feels left behind may start to perceive the other as distant or uncaring, even though the root cause is simply a change in the trajectory of their lives. Changes in relationship dynamics can also be driven by external factors, such as a new romantic relationship, a shift in social circles, or even life circumstances like moving to a new city or starting a new job. When one person's life changes dramatically, it can inadvertently affect their relationship with others. For example, if one person enters a romantic relationship, they may begin to prioritize their partner's needs over their friendships, causing a perceived imbalance in how much time and attention they are giving to the relationship. The friend who is feeling neglected may interpret this shift as a personal affront, feeling as though they have been replaced or left behind. Similarly, if one person's social circle expands or changes, they might begin to spend more time with new people, which can make the original relationship feel secondary or less important. These changes, while often unintentional, can lead to feelings of resentment and alienation, especially if the person who feels left out doesn't know how to express their hurt. Another factor contributing to the changing dynamics of relationships is the influence of unspoken expectations. Over time, people often develop certain expectations about how their relationships should function. These expectations can be based on past experiences, societal norms, or personal desires. However, as individuals change, so too do their expectations. If one person in the relationship fails to communicate these changes, the other person may feel blindsided or hurt when their expectations are not met. For example, if one person in a friendship expects regular communication or shared experiences, but the other person begins to prioritize other aspects of their life, they may feel neglected and unimportant. These unspoken expectations can create a sense of betrayal, as one person may feel that the other is no longer fulfilling the role they once did in their life, without understanding the underlying reasons for the shift. Lastly, changing dynamics can also be a result of unresolved tensions or underlying issues that have not been addressed over time. While people's lives naturally evolve and change, sometimes the unspoken frustrations and misunderstandings within a relationship can fester, making the change feel more like a rupture. For instance, small annoyances or conflicts that have been ignored or dismissed may gradually accumulate, creating a sense of dissatisfaction that only intensifies over time. Eventually, the person who has been silently harboring these issues may begin to pull away, becoming emotionally distant or openly hostile. This can create a cycle where both people feel increasingly alienated from each other, with the true source of the tension being overlooked or avoided, until it becomes too significant to ignore. In many cases, these changes in relationship dynamics are not immediately noticeable, and it can be hard to pinpoint when or why things started to shift. The gradual nature of these changes makes them even more difficult to address, as both parties may be unaware of how their evolving lives and unmet expectations are contributing to the growing distance between them. However, recognizing that relationship dynamics are fluid and subject to change is an important first step in navigating these shifts. While it may feel like a sudden breakdown, the reality is that these changes are often the result of ongoing incremental developments that have simply reached a tipping point. One of the most painful yet common reasons why someone may suddenly start hating or distancing themselves from you is due to the erosion of trust. Trust is the foundation of all relationships, whether they are personal, romantic, or professional. Once that trust is broken or compromised, it's incredibly difficult to repair. The erosion of trust can occur for many reasons, from lies and betrayals to small repeated actions that gradually chip away at the confidence and respect that once existed between two people. The process is often slow and insidious, with the effects of broken trust not always immediately apparent. At first, a person might overlook or forgive minor breaches of trust, but over time these small betrayals build up, and the sense of security in the relationship diminishes. Lies are one of the most direct and damaging ways in which trust can be broken. Whether they are big or small, lies undermine the foundation of honesty that is essential in any meaningful connection. Even a single lie can create doubt, and once doubt is introduced into a relationship, it can be incredibly difficult to remove. The person who has been lied to may begin to question everything the other person says or does, no matter how innocent it might seem. The effect of this is compounded by the fact that the liar often becomes defensive when confronted, which only deepens the sense of betrayal. The person who feels deceived may begin to withdraw emotionally, finding it difficult to forgive or forget the hurt caused by the dishonesty. Over time, this emotional withdrawal can turn into resentment, and eventually the relationship may begin to break down entirely. Another way in which trust can erode is through betrayal of any kind. Betrayal can take many forms: cheating in a romantic relationship, undermining someone at work, or sharing confidential information with others. Regardless of the nature of the betrayal, it has the same effect: it creates a massive rift in the relationship. The person who has been betrayed may feel not only hurt but also humiliated, questioning their own judgment and feeling deeply disrespected. The emotional damage caused by betrayal is not easily repaired, as it often leaves the betrayed person feeling vulnerable and exposed. Trust once lost is extremely hard to rebuild. Even if the person who betrayed them expresses regret and apologizes, the emotional scars often remain, and the relationship may never be the same again. In addition to blatant dishonesty and betrayal, trust can also be eroded by actions that undermine the other person's sense of security. For example, a person might fail to follow through on promises, or repeatedly cancel plans or commitments without any real explanation. These actions, though not as overtly harmful as lying or betraying someone, can still chip away at trust over time. When someone feels that their time, energy, or feelings are not valued, they begin to question the other person's reliability and intentions. Even small repeated instances of disappointment can lead to a larger feeling of distrust, and the individual who has been let down may start to withdraw emotionally, feeling unimportant or neglected. Over time, this can lead to feelings of resentment, and the relationship may become increasingly strained, especially if the individual who has been hurt doesn't feel that their concerns are being acknowledged. Sometimes trust is also damaged by lack of communication or emotional support. In close relationships, people rely on one another for emotional validation and understanding. If one person feels that they are consistently giving more than they are receiving, or that their emotional needs are not being met, they may begin to feel disconnected and resentful. This lack of emotional reciprocity can feel like a betrayal of trust, especially if one person feels that the other is taking them for granted. Over time, the person who feels neglected may start to feel that they can no longer rely on the other person, and this breakdown in emotional support can lead to a deep sense of betrayal. In relationships where one person is emotionally unavailable or dismissive of the other's needs, the lack of trust can cause an irreparable divide, turning what was once a supportive connection into a cold, distant one. The erosion of trust can also happen when people become involved in toxic or manipulative behaviors. These behaviors can range from gaslighting, where one person manipulates the other into doubting their own reality, to emotional blackmail or controlling behaviors. These tactics can cause deep psychological harm, as they undermine the victim's sense of self-worth and autonomy. In relationships marked by manipulation or control, trust is completely broken, as the person being manipulated no longer feels that they can trust their own perceptions or judgments. The person on the receiving end of these behaviors may begin to feel trapped and helpless, questioning whether they can rely on the person who is mistreating them. Eventually, the emotional damage caused by manipulation can lead to the destruction of the relationship, as the individual who is being controlled may begin to feel angry, resentful, and deeply hurt. Lastly, the erosion of trust can occur when someone fails to acknowledge or apologize for their mistakes. In any relationship, it is normal for people to make mistakes. What differentiates healthy relationships from unhealthy ones is the willingness to acknowledge those mistakes and take responsibility for them. When someone repeatedly refuses to apologize or admit fault, it creates an imbalance in the relationship, where one person is left feeling unheard and invalidated. This refusal to take responsibility can cause deep frustration and resentment, as it implies that the person who has been hurt is not worthy of an apology or acknowledgement. Over time, this lack of accountability can cause the person who feels wronged to lose respect for the other person, leading to a breakdown in trust. As this erosion continues, the relationship may deteriorate to the point where it becomes irreparable, leaving both parties feeling hurt, misunderstood, and bitter. Ultimately, the erosion of trust is one of the most insidious reasons why relationships break down. Trust is fragile, and once it's damaged, it can take an immense amount of time, effort, and vulnerability to rebuild. Unfortunately, in many cases, the damage is too deep to repair, and the relationship falls apart as a result. The emotional pain caused by broken trust is often compounded by feelings of betrayal, confusion, and frustration, making it one of the hardest things to move past in any kind of relationship. Sometimes people start to hate or distance themselves from others due to deeply ingrained jealousy or envy. Jealousy, often rooted in feelings of inadequacy or insecurity, can emerge when someone feels that another person has something they desire but cannot attain. It might be a material possession, a particular lifestyle, success, relationships, or qualities such as confidence or attractiveness. While jealousy is a natural emotion that everyone experiences at some point, when it is not managed or addressed, it can lead to a toxic mindset and harmful behavior. In relationships, jealousy can cause significant emotional harm, as the jealous person may begin to project their negative emotions onto others, often acting out in ways that cause friction and resentment. The person feeling envious may start to believe that their own worth is diminished in comparison to others, leading them to view the other person as a threat rather than a friend or peer. This jealousy can be subtle at first, starting with small feelings of resentment or frustration whenever the person experiences success or happiness. Over time, however, these feelings can grow into full-blown hostility, where the jealous person feels the need to belittle or undermine the other individual in order to cope with their own feelings of inferiority. This might involve making passive-aggressive comments, spreading rumors, or finding ways to diminish the other person's achievements or qualities. Even if the jealous individual doesn't express their emotions outright, the shift in their behavior can be palpable. The more they internalize their feelings of jealousy without addressing them, the more likely they are to pull away emotionally and mentally from the relationship, creating a rift that may become impossible to repair. What's often painful for the person on the receiving end is that they may not even realize that jealousy exists, as it often manifests in subtle ways that are hard to pinpoint. Jealousy can also stem from comparing one's own life to others, especially in today's age of social media, where everyone's successes and achievements are often on display for the world to see. Constant exposure to curated images of other people's lives can create unrealistic standards and expectations, leading people to feel dissatisfied with their own situation. In this context, it becomes easy for jealousy to fester, especially if someone feels that they are falling behind or lacking in comparison. Social media amplifies this because it often portrays a skewed version of reality, one where people are constantly succeeding, traveling, and living their best lives. As a result, those who are struggling or feel stagnant in their own lives might begin to view others' apparent success with resentment, which can translate into feelings of hatred or emotional withdrawal. It's also possible for the jealous person to feel resentment not just because of the material success the other person has achieved, but because of the attention or admiration they are receiving from others, making them feel left out or unseen. Another aspect of jealousy that can lead to animosity is the fear of losing a connection. In romantic relationships or close friendships, jealousy often arises when one person perceives that their bond with the other is being threatened by an external factor, perhaps a new friend, a potential romantic partner, or a shift in priorities. In such cases, the jealous person might begin to feel as though they are being replaced or neglected, which can lead to possessiveness and attempts to control the situation. The more the jealous person feels their sense of security being challenged, the more they may lash out at the perceived threat. This behavior often stems from insecurity and fear of abandonment. They might start to resent the other person for what they believe is an encroachment on their relationship, even though the other person may not have any intention of betraying them. This dynamic can create a toxic cycle of mistrust, accusations, and emotional distance, where the jealous individual pushes the other person away while simultaneously feeling increasingly isolated and threatened. Jealousy can also arise in the workplace, where professional competition or rivalry often breeds negative feelings. When one colleague seems to excel or receive recognition, it can trigger feelings of jealousy in others who feel overlooked or less successful. This is particularly common in high-stakes or high-pressure environments, where success is often measured in terms of promotions, awards, or public recognition. Those who feel that they are not getting the same opportunities or acknowledgement may begin to harbor feelings of bitterness toward their colleagues. This jealousy can manifest in various ways, from subtle sabotage or undermining of the other person's work to overt hostility. The jealous individual might start to resent the colleague's achievements, not because they dislike the person, but because they feel that they are being unfairly overlooked or denied the same recognition. In such cases, the jealousy is less about the person themselves and more about the perceived disparity in opportunities or outcomes. If these feelings are left unchecked, they can create a toxic work environment, where collaboration and mutual respect are replaced with competition and resentment. Even in family dynamics, jealousy can arise between siblings or relatives. This is particularly common when there is a perceived imbalance in attention, affection, or resources. Siblings might feel jealous if one sibling is favored or receives more praise for their accomplishments, even if the favoritism is unintentional. This can lead to underlying tension, where the jealous family member feels neglected or unimportant. Over time, this can turn into resentment and hostility, even though the root cause might not always be clear to everyone involved. Family jealousy is often compounded by deep-seated emotions tied to childhood experiences or family expectations, and as a result, it can become harder to resolve. When one sibling feels that they are perpetually in the shadow of the other, they might begin to harbor negative feelings, which can affect their behavior and interactions. This jealousy can lead to feelings of inadequacy, anger, and frustration, and if it's not addressed, it can cause lasting damage to familial relationships. In romantic relationships, jealousy often stems from fear of infidelity or a perceived emotional betrayal. When one partner feels threatened by the attention the other is receiving from someone else, whether it's a friend, colleague, or stranger, it can lead to feelings of insecurity and possessiveness. This type of jealousy is particularly destructive because it taps into deep-seated fears about abandonment and loss. A partner who feels jealous may become hypervigilant, constantly questioning the other's intentions or actions. Over time, this behavior can create an unhealthy dynamic where trust is eroded, and the relationship becomes more about controlling the other person rather than fostering a healthy, mutually supportive connection. In extreme cases, jealousy can lead to emotional manipulation, where one partner tries to isolate the other from friends or family in an attempt to regain control over the relationship. This jealousy, when left unchecked, can turn into resentment, causing both parties to feel trapped, misunderstood, and emotionally drained. Lastly, jealousy can manifest in friendships, particularly when one friend feels that the other is receiving more attention, success, or recognition in their social circle. This type of jealousy can be particularly insidious because friendships are often built on trust and mutual support, and when jealousy creeps in, it undermines the very foundation of the relationship. One friend might begin to feel envious if the other is getting more praise or is becoming the center of attention, which can create a competitive atmosphere. This dynamic can lead to passive-aggressive behavior, subtle put-downs, or emotional withdrawal. Over time, the jealous friend may feel as though they are not valued or appreciated, leading to resentment and anger. This jealousy can cause a wedge between friends, making it harder to maintain a genuine supportive connection. Ultimately, jealousy, when unchecked, can create deep emotional rifts in relationships, transforming what might once have been a healthy bond into a source of tension and resentment. Whether it's based on material success, emotional attachment, or perceived imbalance in a relationship, jealousy can drive people to act in ways that push others away, even though the jealousy itself is rooted in fear and insecurity.